Cade Cunningham has officially been named an All-Star. He is the Pistons' first All-Star since Blake Griffin in 2019. Congrats to Cade. We'll talk about what kind of moment this is for the Pistons, for Cade. Today's episode, Locked On Pistons podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Ku Cahill. You can find me over on Twitter at Ku Cahill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers. We're just below 500 subscribers away. Around 48% of you guys who watch or listen are not subscribed. So please, you want to find the best way to support the channel. Hit that subscribe button. Help us get to 10K. Or you can leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Also, I'll leave a link to the playback room down below. I'll be live streaming Piston games the rest of the year. Come chill in the room, watch the game with us, talk with us, chill with us. It was a lot of fun last game. So if you want to join that, I'll link it down below. Also, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app today or head to FanDuel.com to get started. We are joined by friend of the podcast, Zar. What's up, man? How you doing, dude?
Locked On Sixth Man of the Year. You might as well add that on there.
I was going to say Locked On. I got stuck just now. I was going to say BullyBall, but then I was going to do the sixth man. I was going to do Jalen Green. Didn't know which one to go. Didn't know which one to go with.
Yeah.
But how you doing, man?
I'm great. I'm very busy with college right these days, but my last semester, so we're locked in. No pun intended. But yeah, no, it should be a good episode. I'm excited to talk some Pistons hoops.
Yeah, so we're recording right after, literally, I think 30 minutes ago or an hour ago or so, Cade was announced as an All-Star. I know it seemed like that it was going to happen. I don't think there wasn't much doubt, but I feel like as the time started to get closer and closer, there were people, we were like, oh my God, is it actually going to happen? Is he going to get snubbed? Is he going to make it? Like, what's going to happen? And then you had the 2K leak out, or not leak, but like post their All-Star teams, I guess, or something. And Cade wasn't on there, and everyone was like, oh my God, no way. Then the Pistons sent out an email that was saying that Cade All-Star, but then that was an accident. That didn't mean that. It was all kinds of crazy stuff leading up. But Cade is named an All-Star, his fourth year in the NBA. He makes the All-Star team. That 2021 class, you tweeted it out. I saw it. They got a lot of guys in the All-Star game this year. You got Cade, you got Evan Mobley, you got Franz making it. This is a deep class. You got Sengun making it. This was a deep class. But how do you feel about Cade making the All-Star team? Was there any doubts for you heading into it?
I won't lie. I definitely had a little bit of doubt. Not because I don't think he deserves it, but it felt like with the fan voting and the results after like the starters were announced, it did feel like there was like a slight chance that he gets snubbed. But there was a strong media push like in the last like month or so, like a very strong media push that kind of I think should have given Pistons fans a little bit of reassurance. But me personally, I did think there was a chance, especially watching live when I saw Darius Garland get announced for it. I was like, okay, maybe. But I was fairly certain that Cade would make it, and he definitely deserves it. I mean, genuinely deserves to be in MVP discussions. Obviously, I'm not saying he should win it this year or anything like that, but he's been playing at an extremely high level. There is only a handful of players that can even say they're playing around that same level as Cade Cunningham this season. And his team has gotten so much better this year. And he still carries a really strong workload on this team. So the amount that he has improved and the amount that his team has improved, very well deserved All-Star selection for Cade Cunningham. Genuinely, I tweeted this a little over a year ago. I think it was like December 2023. And this was, I think, in the midst of the losing streak. I want to say after like the Boston game, something around there. And I had said, if Cade Cunningham and the Detroit Pistons are able to turn this around by next year, he has the greatest origin story in like any NBA player has ever had to go through. Like they talk about, like, obviously, like, oh, Devin Booker went through a lot of losing, Joel Embiid, like there's levels to the amount of suffering that Cade has gone through, and like the amount of perseverance that he's had to do. Like he's had to really overcome at every step of his career so far. So to get rewarded for an all-star selection, it feels really well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he for sure was an all-star, like you said. He's been fantastic this year for the Pistons, man. We've talked about it nonstop on the podcast. I think I want to just shout out one area that I feel like needs to be highlighted when you talk about him being an all-star this year. I think what really cemented it was just how great he's played without Jay and Ivy, and how he's maintained, this team has maintained, and they had a winning record this month for the first time in 37 months. And this came on the heels of Jay and Ivy getting hurt the first day of the month. And this team went on to continue to succeed. This is not, I know how some of the Ivy stands are going to act. Let's go ahead and get this out the way. This is not a shot at Ivy, okay? Let's calm down. It's simply saying that they lost their secondary creation option. They lost their secondary ball handler. And despite that, Cade can raise his level. He raised his efficiency. He raised his scoring output. This month, he has a 56-2 shooting percentage. He's averaging around 26.8 points a game, shooting around 46% from the field, 37% from deep. He's going up to 87% from the free throw line, which is where we kind of expect him to be. But he's just gotten better. When they need him to get better, when they need him to take on more of the scoring load, when they need him to raise and be that franchise player to keep them afloat and keep them in this 6th seed hunt, he did that. And I think that, along with like what you mentioned with the media push, he did get a very heavy media push. Like this dude was on NBA TNT. This dude was on this dude was on ESPN with
Bro, I felt like I was watching a My Player like storyline. I was like, I never see anybody in studio at TNT.
He was suited up too, like he was ready for it. but he did get a strong media push. But I thought this month in January really just secured it for him. I thought how he played this month was exceptional, with multiple like key victories too. With how he played against Houston that third quarter, that New York game was crazy. That 40-point game against Anthony Edwards and Minnesota and getting that win. Like he had multiple signature victories and multiple signature performances that I thought really pushed him over. So congrats to Cade, man. 4th year, he makes it. I think he probably would have liked to have it happen before his 4th year, but got sidelined with that injury his 2nd year. Last year obviously was sabotage from within, but but he makes it. Like we mentioned though, a few of the other guys from the 21 class made it as well. You got Sengun made it, Evan Mobley made it, you got Franz Wagner who made it. A few other guys. I know there's at least one other guy that may have made it if he didn't get hurt. But just real quickly before we move on, I know it's the Pistons podcast, but it's All-Star, All-Star weekend's coming up. All-Stars were just revealed. Was there any shock to you about anything real quick before we move on to the trade deadline update that we did get for the Pistons? Was there any Eastern Conference shock, or actually we'll do the whole NBA. Was there an East or West shock that you thought was either a snub or a shock that they made it?
I'm honestly surprised LaMelo did not make the All-Star team. I know that he was leading fan voting, but that only gets you so far. I was surprised though that he didn't make it. I really thought he was going to get in over Darius Garland. And I understand the LaMelo snub more than who I'm about to get into, because LaMelo's team just isn't good this year. And obviously, you're ultimately being rewarded for your individual performance when you get named an all-star. But like the argument made for Cade's stats last year, if he had made it, would feel like it wasn't, they weren't on the same playing field. Because, why is one person's empty stats count as, an all-star to another? But I was surprised that he didn't make it. And I am still a LaMelo fan. I don't want to make it seem like I'm hating or anything like that. I definitely am a fan of his game. But the biggest snub to me was Trae Young by far. I think he has been like excellent for Atlanta this year. No DeJounte Murray and a pretty just like scrappy roster, and they've remained competitive. His assists, like his playmaking, ridiculous this year. I think he's really shown that he is a point guard through and through, while also still being one of the better shooters in the NBA. I was very surprised he didn't make it. I also think Darius Garland's been great, but Trae Young is absolutely a snub.
Yeah, I think the two snubs for me is the same ones you mentioned. First of all, I was shocked, really shocked that J-Dub made it for OKC. I did not expect him to make it as a reserve. That not saying they don't deserve it; they're the first seed, but I was I was pleasantly shocked that he made it in the West. So that's my shock on that side. On the East, I'm right there with you. I was shocked that Trey or LaMelo. I thought for sure one of them were going to make it. I thought for sure one of them would make it, but neither of them made it. LaMelo, his team is just like you said. His team is just so bad that I get it. Like I'm also a LaMelo fan. I don't know why everyone in the media seems to like dislike him so much. I think I know why, his dad, and then whatever. But I think LaMelo obviously is really damn good. I think he played like an all-star, but his team just isn't good enough. So I get that. So I understand his. But like you mentioned with Trey, I think Trey should have made it over Tyler Hero. I'm not gonna lie to you. And he's having a good season. He's having a really good year. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but I don't think there's any executive, there's no way anyone would take Tyler Hero over Trae Young. Like, Trae Young is scoring, and he's arguably one of the best playmakers literally in the entire NBA. Like, his playmaking completely carries the Hawks offense. It's otherworldly. Tyler Hero is a great scorer. But I'm not trying to make it seem like he's not having a good year, because he is, but I don't think he's even close. Maybe not even close is maybe a little disrespectful, but I don't think they're on the same playing field, him and Trey. I think Trey just carries a way different burden, and much more of a burden, and is capable of so many more things. And he's had a great year, especially playmaking wise. So I was definitely shocked about Trey. LaMelo, like you mentioned, record wise, thing, it is what it is. But I honestly, I'm still pretty shocked that J-Dub made it. But
I
thought
really
for sure
surprised.
Sabonis was going to make it.
Yeah, I thought he was a lock. But when you mentioned the playmaking, to me, I think the best three playmakers in basketball right now are, in no particular order, Jokic, Trey, Cade. Those are the best. And I'm genuinely, truly shocked. It's crazy to me how Trey went from media, villain, the whole thing he got pushed as, and that 21 playoff series, to just another guy now. It's really weird.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with that, but I'm sure he'll make one. He's going to make one, get back to being an all-star regular at some point. Trey's really damn good, but definitely shocked that he didn't make this one. But coming up, though, we're going to talk about some updated trade news, or not trade news, but trade deadline news involving the Detroit Pistons. We'll talk about that coming up. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying about some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can have the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Again, we're on our way to 10,000 subscribers. We're almost there. I need all of you guys who are not subscribed, who are listening, please hit that subscribe button. We are less than 500 subs away. Really want to get there by the end of the year. I really would appreciate it. Also, we're doing the playback rooms. I talked about it earlier. We did one on Friday, or not Friday. We did it on Wednesday. It was a lot of fun. Had a lot of people in there. You come in, you watch the game with us. You can chat in the chat with all of us. Hang out, come up on the room and just talk with us. It was a lot of fun. If you want to join the next one, which I will be having every Pistons game, I'll put the link down below. You can join it there. Bye, Czar. So we got some trade deadline updates with the Detroit Pistons. I think one of the main storylines for the Pistons the last few weeks is, what are they going to do? Which way are they going to go? Are they going to acquire a good player and try to get better this year? Or are they still under we're really just trying to absorb a contract to get a future asset? Which way are they going to go? And the Pistons being 23 and 24 and Cade being this good has kind of made it that's what's made it a conversation. That's what's made it so confusing. But according to Mike Scotto, he reports that, and this is straight from his article today, quote, the Detroit Pistons are seeking a future first-round pick as a facilitator using their $14 million or $14 million in cap space in a multi-team trade scenario. Teams looking to dump unwanted salaries to duck below the luxury tax threshold and second apron have circled with interest. So, Czar, I'll give my thoughts on that. What do you take from the reporting today on the Pistons' potential trade deadline plans?
Not surprised. Everything that has been known about this team in terms of like roster movement, roster construction has remained pretty consistent. Like there was only that brief period where, there was talks of, oh, they're looking at possibly buying. And I still think there is a possibility that they kind of get the best of both worlds at this deadline. And when I mean buying, I don't mean like going out and getting an fringe all-star type of player. Like I mean just like going and acquiring a player rather than, acquiring them for assets. And I think the goal is to recoup their asset collection right now because there isn't much there in terms of draft selection. And when they do, because I feel like it's a when they do make a trade for that caliber of player, I think they want to be prepared to make the best offer. I don't think they want to be outbid. And I think they want to have as much flexibility as possible, like when it comes to acquiring talent. So I don't necessarily look at them going into this deadline with the mindset of acquiring assets as them selling or them moving towards like, okay, let's get our pick back. I look at it more like let's kind of stand pat while getting something for like the cap space, because the cap space they have is flexibility. It is an asset. And it'll allow them to get a first round pick for taking on an unwanted contract. With that being said, would I be surprised if they do something like that where they get maybe a first round pick for, and I don't expect them the contract they get to be something that's really long term, nor do I expect it to be something that's like eating up most of their cap space going forward either, because I still think regardless of what contract they bring in, they still want to, remain flexible going into the offseason, because I'm very confident that this offseason they will be looking at moving towards taking this team as seriously as possible. Like I fully believe that the days of, oh, maybe like, they can go out in the draft and get this guy and then, sign a mid-tier, low-tier free agent, like, that's probably what we're looking at best. I think those days are over. I think this team right now wants to see how far they can go, especially Trajan. At the end of the day, he didn't draft a lot of these guys on this team, but he did construct this roster. So I think a part of him definitely wants to see how far his creation can go. And I think for that, I don't see a lot of roster movement, but I do see them probably taking an asset back. And I would look at them in the buyout market after the trade deadline to possibly assess that secondary ball handling, role.
So I think the one part of his report that I really got interested by, that I thought was interesting to see, was the last part where he says teams looking to dump unwanted salaries to duck below the luxury tax and second apron have circled with interest. So I had Keith Smith of Spot Track on the podcast a few weeks ago, I believe last week actually, and he spoke about. I asked him, where should Pistons fans be focusing? Where should they be looking at that the Pistons could find themselves working with, a trade that could potentially happen? What was he hearing? All this kind of stuff. And obviously we heard, he said the same thing along the lines of, they could go out and get a player that is supposed to be an impact player. They could go out and just try to get a bad contract and get some salary, etc. But what he mentioned at the end that could be a possibility that he doesn't think people have talked about a lot with the Pistons is what was at the end of this quote, which is, like you kind of mentioned at the beginning, a best of both worlds situation where the Pistons aren't taking on a bad contract, but a team that maybe doesn't want to be paying that luxury tax, that's like maybe 2 million, 10 million away from the luxury tax, that maybe is just trying to get out from under the, not just the second apron, but also the luxury tax. There's multiple levels, and there's teams that may not want to be paying even the luxury tax. That teams that are trying to get below that by the end of the year could look at the Pistons and be like, okay, well, we don't really want to be, our owners don't really want to be paying this. We're not good enough to be paying this for real. We just want to get underneath that. And could be a good player that they're trying to, they give up because they're just trying to get out from underneath that cap. And along with that, for doing a favor for them, you get an asset with it. Maybe, I don't think they'll get, to be honest, I don't think they're going to get a future first. I think they might get a few seconds. If they get a future first, I think that would be an incredible move from Trajan. I think that would be incredibly savvy. It would be a really good move. I don't see that happening though, but if they're able to pull it off, good for them. But I think I think they're probably, if I had to take a guess, I feel like that they're going to be involved in the Jimmy Butler deal. Once that deal ends up happening, I think it's probably going to end up being like a 4-team, damn near maybe even a 5-team deal at that point, especially if they find a way to give him to Phoenix. It's definitely going to be like a 5-team at that point if he gets to Phoenix. I think the Pistons will probably be involved in that. And in a lot of the scenarios I've seen, that doesn't just involve them taking on, I know a lot of fans are thinking, oh, they're just going to take on a bad player and he's not going to be. A lot of those situations don't involve them just taking on a bad player. Like a lot of these situations of these teams who are trying to get involved in these trades at the deadline, whether you're trying to get after Jimmy Butler or whatever, or De'Aaron Fox, there's guys who are usable and actually still fine players that are just being paid a little too much that the Pistons may take on and could actually help the Pistons. And that, again, that's not even including what I mentioned about teams that maybe are just looking at the Pistons like, hey, we don't really want to be paying the second tax or the luxury tax. We don't really want to be in the second apron. Can you take this dude off our hands? And they're like, oh, yeah, this guy's actually good. He can help us. We'll pay him that money. Like, there's a few names I'm thinking of, but I don't really want to say it right now because I'm not completely sure. I'll have a trade deadline episode, though, where I make predictions coming up.
Give me one name.
One name?
Yeah.
I feel like if the Warriors actually try to make a move, I feel like Andrew Wiggins could be something that happens. It's only if the Warriors want to like make a big move where his contract has to be moved around. I can see the Pistons taking that on.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Does that mean no Tobias in that scenario?
No comment. I know.
Okay,
Tobias stays. I think there's a non-zero chance that Tobias just retires with the Pistons.
Yeah, I don't see Tobias leaving anytime soon, and I know he's really valued by the team and for his presence in the locker room, and also just by the organization as a whole. So yeah, I don't expect that. But yeah, I do think whoever it is that they end up getting as part of whatever deal, I do think the goal is still this player will help us this season, because I am, even though they're not going to go out realistically and go get, for example, a Zach LaVine, like, I talk about it all the time, like Zach LaVine would be a great fit on this team on paper. They're not going to do it, right? I don't think that means their priority isn't still making the playoffs, because I still 100% think that is. And I think it benefits the players, it benefits the staff, it benefits like the higher ups, like it benefits everybody if this team is good. So I do expect them to still move with that impression of like, whatever we do isn't going to damage us. It's also just not going to like, make us leaps and bounds better, because I think they believe the talent they have right now can at least make a playoff series.
So I want to say these teams. My fault. You broke up a little bit. I thought you were done talking. That's my bad. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, you're good.
But I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna say that these teams. I'm looking at Spot Track because Keith mentioned these teams on the podcast. I didn't remember them, so I wanted to confirm them here. Here are the teams that if I were you Pistons fans, you wanted to do trade machines and all that, I'd go look at these teams. Here are the teams that are in the second apron right now, if I'm reading this correctly on Spot Track. The Phoenix Suns, Minnesota Timberwolves. Timberwolves are a team I really would look at. I'm not going to lie to you. The Celtics and the Bucks, another team I would look at. There are second apron teams. They might want to get out from the second apron. Teams that are past the luxury tax are, along with them, the Knicks, Miami, the Lakers, Denver, Philly, and Golden State's hugging right up against that. along with Dallas, who's hugging up right against it. So those are the teams I'd be looking at. That if it's not just a bad contract for an asset of a dude that can't play, if it's a team that's just trying to create room and trying to get out from all of that, those are the teams right there. Phoenix, Minnesota, Boston, Milwaukee, the Knicks, Miami, Lakers, Denver, Philly, Golden State, and Dallas. That's who I would go do trade machines with. But we'll wrap that one up there. When we come back,
I got
though,
one last thing.
Go ahead.
Okay, just real quick. Let's say there's a scenario where Milwaukee is involved in this multi-team deal for Jimmy Butler and the Pistons are in it. Pistons get, let's say, Pat Connaughton and a future first. And let's say Lonzo Ball doesn't get traded at the deadline and agrees to a buyout with Chicago. Let's say they get Lonzo Ball. Is that a productive deadline, in your opinion?
Yes.
And do
If
you
they
think
get the Lonzo part.
they still remain as good, if not better?
They got to get Lonzo for me to like it.
Okay.
I think Pat Connaughton's just done.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you're getting the first, so I get the idea. But I would really rather, I would hope that they're able to somehow get a player that actually can help and also get that asset. So, but if they get Lonzo, then they accomplish that. So I would say, yes, that would be an accomplishment.
Okay.
All right, so when we come back, I want to ask Czar. I'm going to put him on the spot, and I'll give my answer. I might shock some of you guys. I'm not going to lie to you. Now that Cade's an all-star, is there another future all-star already on this roster? Not someone they have to trade for, draft, someone who's already on this roster. Is there another future all-star on this team? We'll talk about that coming up. But first, I've got to tell you guys a little bit about FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. I'm still sick that the Lions aren't there, but it is what it is. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets all game, my goodness, as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, Czar, I'm putting you on the spot, man. Cade made his all-star team, his first all-star team now. So the Pistons have a all-star on the team. There's been a lot of talk about the Pistons needing to go out and get another guy, maybe trading for a number two, whether that's right now or in the offseason or whatever. My question to you is, do you think that there is another all-star already on this team? That doesn't mean they're an all-star right now, but do you think there's a guy on this team already that will have an all-star berth at some point in his career with the Detroit Pistons? Yes or no? And don't be afraid of any of the stands.
Guaranteed.
Yes, guaranteed. If you had to put your money
I
on
think
it,
guaranteed, yes, there is at least one.
are you gonna say the name or are you gonna just leave it at one?
Okay, obviously the elephant in the room is Jaden Ivey. I only have hesitancy because of a couple things. Mind you, once again, I am a very big proponent of Jaden Ivey's. Always have been, literally since before he was a Detroit Piston. The consistency, number one. I think he was really coming into his own before the injury, but again, that was on a few game sample size. Like it wasn't. He was playing, coming back from an injury, and then got injured again. But prior to coming back from that injury, was looking a little inconsistent, and that's kind of always been the issue with Jaden Ivey so far. And you can make a million cases as to why, he's had 3 different head coaches in 3 seasons now, one of which banished him to basketball hell for no apparent reason. Um, so it's understandable that, like, he's not a complete package at this point. But because he's not a complete package at this point, it's hard to say that, like, he's guaranteed an all-star. Just because obviously the talent is there, right? It's just he has to put it together for longer stretches. And then number 2 is the injury. It's not an easy thing to come back from. I know it's much better than, like, tearing any ligament in his leg or anything like that. Like, it seemed like a clean fracture, but that's still a lot to come back from, especially from someone who is as athletic as he is and how much athleticism is part of his game. Um, Obviously, everybody's hoping for the best, and I'm sure he'll come back great, but it's a question mark right now. We haven't seen post fracture Jaden Ivey yet. So it's hard for me to say, okay, guaranteed Jaden Ivey will be an all-star. Before the season, I would say Jalen Duren. I was very certain Jalen Duren was going to make a leap this season. Hasn't really happened. He's had some good games, but for the most part, it's been more or less the same as last season. To me, the player with the all-star potential on this roster.
Don't you hold on. Let me stop you now. Don't you take my pick. Don't you take my pick, because I was going to shock everybody and tell everyone cause I know everyone's expecting me to say no. You're about to take my pick right here. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I hate to do this to you. I think you might. I think there's a chance your answer is different because I know you love a certain player, but I think Ron Holland. I think Ron Holland is. I, I think Ron Holland absolutely has all-star potential. He is so incredibly young, and you can literally see his progress in real time this year. Um, where he was in the preseason, like, it genuinely looked like a deer in headlights. His first game in the preseason was, I think, he talked about it. He was guarding Dame. He looked like a rookie. He's the first Pistons player in recent memory to really be a rookie, like a true rookie, because I feel like a lot of times the players the Pistons have drafted the last few years, your Ivies, your Durans, your Cades, your even Asars, are put in a position immediately to be good. They are expected to be good upon arrival. Ron Holland wasn't really given that expectation. There was talk of, maybe he's going to get some time in the G League. Like, will he be in the rotation? He's played his way into a genuine, like, very important role on a team that is likely to make the playoffs. As a 19-year-old, he turned 19 like halfway through the season, and the progress he has made from preseason to what is today, January 30th, 2025, is tangible. If you have watched any game from the beginning of the season until now, you have seen a player grow in front of your eyes, and you've seen his confidence grow in front of your eyes. And not only that, obviously Asar is incredibly talented, but there was some talk about Ron Holland's shooting. Like, he wasn't expected to be a good shooter, and for like about a month now, he's been shooting at a pretty respectable clip, especially in the corner. He's great when Cade dumps it off to him. He's caught a couple grenades a few times and still made them. He continues to get better with pressure. His perimeter defense is only improving. His confidence is only improving, and the playmaking on his own, the playmaking for himself, driving to the basket. He has obviously a lot of athleticism. He has a lot of speed, but he also has a lot more finesse than he's given credit for. And that's really been impressive to me of how he finishes at the rim and the second chance opportunities that he creates. I'm very impressed with Ron Holland, and I think he is, if I were to put my money on anybody, he will be the next all-star for the Detroit Pistons.
I just want everyone to know I hate Czar. Before we start recording, I want everyone to know this. Before we start recording, I had this whole bit going. I was like, you're going to be shocked. You don't know what I'm going to say. You don't know what's going to happen. And I know everyone heading into this was expecting me to say, no, it's not going to happen. But my answer was what my answer actually was going to be, if I had to put my own money on it, I would still bet no, because it's hard to do. and people would have to get so much better for it to happen. So if I was actually putting my money on it, I wouldn't do it. But that's my money. We're not talking just my money. Now we're going to go into a different world now where, like, do I expect one to be? I think there's two guys that I believe could be, and it's Ron and Asar. And I know the Jane Ivy stands are going to kill me, and it is what it is. But this is how, like, I'm picked. I can see the vision for both guys. This is how I see it. For Asar, I see him. His pathway to being an all-star is literally just be Iguodala. And when the Pistons are a first, second, third seed, whenever they get swing for that next piece, and they're this great team, and they're at the top of the East, whatever, top 3 seed. And when you have to do, they're playing so well, we need to get 3 all-stars from this team. The guy who plays defense, rebounds, makes for others, like the Derek White role that can't shoot, whatever, or the Aaron Gordon role, I guess, what you could say. I think that's one of those ones where, okay, you get him an all-star. Because kind of like how they were pushing for Derek White a little bit, but I know Asar can't shoot. It's not a player comparison, more like a role comparison. So that's how I envision it for Asar happening. Ron, everything you said was how I envision it happening. Like, I think that Ron, I don't like comparing development to this player, because I'm sure every fan and every fan base compares their young athletic wing that can drive and dunk to this player. Like, I know it happens everywhere.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it anyways. Like, I feel like Ron is showing that he could be on like a Jaylen Brown kind of development, like, arc. Like, his shot creation, he flashes his shot creation quite a bit. His how he's shooting from 3 this month is pretty impressive. I'm not gonna lie, it's impressing me. His willingness outside this last game, he was actually frustrating me. He passed up a couple open threes, but for most of this season, his willingness just to shoot the 3 when it's there, not to be afraid to take it, that's been impressive. His touch around the rim, his creativity around the rim, his creativity on drives, his footwork on drives. That you mentioned how slithery he is on drives, how he is defensively. I think he can be a better defender than Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown's slightly overrated as a defender. Ron Holland it could be a really good one. So I think that if there's a Piston that you say could be an all-star in the future, I think it's your 2 wings. I think it's Asar and Ron. That's who I don't think it's gonna be Duren. I don't think it's going to be Ivy. Because I don't think Ivy is. I'm not gonna go into that. I just don't think it's. I wouldn't bet it would be Ivy. Yeah, I think I'll say why. Screw it. I don't care.
Go ahead.
I think the reason why it won't be Ivy is because Ivy's role will eventually be replaced by someone that they trade for. Like the second. I'm assuming most people view Ivy as the second scoring option, whereas I think Ivy has secured his role on this team in the future, at least as some kind of participating role, because he has proven so far this year. That he was like trending the right way and could be like a guy off the bench. I think as a 6-man, like a Malik Monk type of role, a really good Malik Monk. That's how I view him. I think they're gonna go trade for that number 2 guy, the number 2 scorer. I think that dude will take that role. So that's why I don't think it will be Ivy. I think the next dude they trade for is going to be that number 2 scorer. So then it's about the guys that fit around that. So I think Asar and Ron are the guys. And I'll say this, I'll admit this too. I'll admit it. I love Asar. I think Asar has a higher ceiling than Ron. But I think Ron is probably more realistic to hit his ceiling than Asar is to hit his. I think Asar has the higher ceiling, but his is going to be harder to reach. His requires his jump shot to come around. And he's so far away from that happening that it's harder to see the ceiling. Whereas Ron, I can see the ceiling. It's still going to be hard to reach. I'm not trying to sit here and say he's going to do it, but you put your money on it. Like, it's still going to be hard. I just think Ron seems a little bit more, a clearer path to his ceiling being hit. So those are my picks.
Yeah. And on the Jaylen Brown thing, that's actually funny because on media day, you were there. I was sitting right next to you. I asked Ron about, I was saying this. I was like, oh, I forgot we were sitting right next to each other. Ron, I asked him, because he had talked about in the preseason. I think he went on Kevin Garnett's podcast. They had something at it was like a players event, and he talked about how the Celtics were the team he's looking forward to playing the most. And he talked about how he sees a little bit of Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, whatever, and how they're the best team, and he wants to beat the best team. So I said, because from day one, I have seen Ron kind of in that, like, obviously every player has a player that when they're in the draft, they're like, he could be this player, and they never really are. But I always saw that as a possibility. Not saying I ever thought it would happen, but I saw it as a possibility. And that's why I thought he was probably one of the highest upside guys in the entire draft. And I had asked him if he saw any similarities between a duo of a young Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, to current, Cade Cunningham, Ron Holland. He dismissed it. He was like, I don't, I don't want to go into comparisons or whatever, but it's kind of hard to not see at this point, like the comparisons are definitely there. And I think it was my brother, he either tweeted it or sent me it. There's a stat that compares each of their stats in their rookie year. And they're almost identical, Jaylen Brown and Ron Holland stats. Like, I think they're shooting about the exact same at three, exact same points per game. It's really striking. If you look at, I was trying to find it when you were talking, but I couldn't. But it's hard not to see, and that's the thing you said about Asar as well. Like, there are more things that need to happen in order for him to hit that ceiling that are big ifs. Like, not saying they can't happen, but they really are big ifs. Like, Ron's 3-point shooting in half of a season has shown like great improvement. And obviously there's been a lot Asar's had to recover from in terms of like the blood clots and everything like that, just getting back into basketball shape, which is why it's kind of hard to assess him right now as a player, because you don't know what type of basketball shape he's in. It just makes more sense that Ron could be that guy. I think there is a world though where Ivy does, even if he doesn't hit that like Russell Westbrook, Ja Morant comparisons he was given on draft night, just because I think he can be a really dynamic scorer. And I'm with you, honestly. I don't see him as this, at least right now. I don't see him as the second option on this team. Like, moving forward, I do think it's very likely that they go out and get that guy. But I think Ivy would be an elite third option. Like, if you have Jaden Ivey as your third option, that is the best case scenario, because you look at someone like Tyler Harrow, for example, who was just named an All-Star today, and they're not similar as players, but in terms of like the role that they play and the kind of tier player that I see them as, I kind of see them right now, at least, in a similar tier of Ivy kind of being in that. So there is a world, I think, where he makes an all-star team like Tyler Hero did. Because for most of Hero's career, he's been the third option. It's been Jimmy and Bam, and then Tyler, even sometimes Duncan. But he's still been extremely valuable, and he's still had a great career and is now an all-star. So yeah.
I want to wrap it up by just saying this. It's going to be incredibly hard for the Pistons to get an all-star out of anyone else, because go back to just the first segment that we were talking about, all the snubs that we were talking about. Like, you got guys like LaMelo that didn't make it, guys like Trey that didn't make it, guys like a Sabonis in the West that didn't make it. You got Paolo who didn't make it only because he only played 14 games. Like, there's Scotty Barnes, who's gonna eventually make it once Toronto's like not trash, but like there's so many guys that are already like I like next up that like are being snubbed. Like, can you see them being better than Trey? Like, it's just there's a lot. I think there's just a lot of talent in the NBA now. There are a lot. Like, I feel like in 10 plus years ago, there really were only like 20 All Stars in the NBA. I feel like now there's probably like 35. There's a lot of talent in the NBA now, and there's a lot of All Star level players that don't get named All Stars. So
For sure.
I think it's gonna be hard, but we'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah.
But I'll give you the quick last point, but we gotta wrap up.
Yeah, no, I got you. I'm keeping track of the time in the corner. No, I'm with you on that. But I think I just mean in terms of fighting for like an all-star spot, rather than actually ending up making it is basically what I was just gonna say there.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough, but we'll see if they're able to pull it off. I'm really, I'm still upset that Zar spoiled my big. Like I was planning to make it like a big reveal and everything. Like it was about to it was about to take everyone by surprise. It was
My fault. Yeah, my fault.
two great minds think alike, I guess.
I'm never getting put on this podcast again.
But that's all we got for you guys today, man. Thank you, Zar, for coming on, man. You guys can follow him on the screen. There's a bunch of good work on his Twitter at BullyBall as well. Great stuff. Follow him over there. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Till next time, peace out.